Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of MPL. Today, we are joined by two very, very special guests. I have no doubt that you already know these two really amazing people. They also have their own podcast, by the way. It's called Saleh Family Speaks, and I really love it. It's my gym go to listen. Every Mondays, I'm a big fan. So if you haven't checked it out, please do check it out. But before we get started, I would like to open up the floor to them to introduce themselves.
All right. Me first?
You're the fancy one.
Fancy. Why, thank you. I don't mind that. So my name's Sana Saleh. I guess I'm the wife of Saleh family.
Great.
I'm Pakistani, and we have two little girls. We live in Toronto. We actually are new to Ontario. We moved here only 2 years ago. We're BC born and raised, but we actually love Ontario, so it's been quite fun. Yeah,
It's grown on us for sure.
yeah.
And I am the less better half, Muhammad William Saleh. I'm a revert to Islam of about 11, 12 years,
Yeah.
roughly. And yeah, I'm an aircraft maintenance engineer by trade, which has been kind of quiet since COVID happened. So we decided to jump on TikTok and
Yeah.
kind of go from there. So here we are sitting here
Yeah.
with these lovely people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much once again for joining
Thank
us.
you for having me.
This is going to be a continuation of our marriage series. So if you have been following, you probably would have watched the single male and the single female one. So this one's sort of to shine a light on the married couple perspective. And so we wanted to ask you, because you are sort of intercultural, like an intercultural couple, even in my family, even my mom and dad are kind of split on this. There is sometimes a knock or lack of a better term, against the idea of an intercultural marriage, not because of like some sort of like arrogance or anything, just because there's different cultures, different languages, there's different practices, and so how was your sort of transition into that, and what do you think like? How much importance should someone prioritize when they're sort of assessing a potential as to h- how much should they value this like sort of intercultural thing?
It's a
Hmm.
great question.
Yeah.
I would just begin by saying that in terms of kind of how to jump into the intercultural and how it was for us, obviously, for those that don't know, it was more me jumping into the Pakistani culture versus the other way around, just
Hmm.
so people know.
Hmm.
And honestly, the way that I have always viewed it is if you want something to work, you're willing to do the necessary step, take the necessary steps to make that thing work.
Hmm.
So, for example, I spent a lot of time in the beginning of me being Muslim with the Tablighi Jamaat brothers, if you're familiar. So, I'm saying majority, but where I'm from, majority of them are Pakistani. So, it really helped me to kind of understand, for one, the culture, for two, the language. Not that I understand, but I do. I can
Hmm.
understand. I can pick things up
Hmm.
in terms of conversations, and like the food and just all in general. I was obviously a little bit more blessed than other people maybe in my situation because I did travel to Pakistan. I spent 80 days there,
It's
and
a long time.
it is a long
It's a
time.
real for a white boy.
Um,
It's a really long time.
it is, yeah, but alhamdulillah. So I got to really see and kind of immerse myself in the culture prior to marriage. So, I mean, I spent so much time with the local people and right from like Hyderabad in the south to Barako in the north and east to west. And I saw a lot of the country and the people. So when I did come back and we did kind of set up the proposal and for marriage, I really had a good understanding of the culture and what was kind of what would be expected of me, but also the the kind of the culturalized side of it that her parents especially that they would be no doubt concerned that
Hmm.
I am white. It is a completely different thing, like it or not. And like you mentioned, that it's not out of a hatred or anything. It's more out of like a concern for their child that
Yeah.
what the compatibility issue that comes about,
Hmm.
even something like food, right? So that like myself, I got enough to be able to love desi food, and it's no issue that way. So I think that that kind of answers that question of that if you
Hmm.
really want to make it work, you can make it work. I
Hmm.
don't suggest spending a couple of months in a foreign country to understand the culture. There's much easier ways of going about it. But if you really want something, you have to take the steps necessary to put at ease the hearts of the significant
Hmm.
others, parents, and family. That way, it's much easier for them to kind of accept.
And I think the struggle that parents have very cultural parents. Obviously, my parents are Pakistani, very, very cultural. Like, no one in any lineage on either side of my family, and my dad has like 15 siblings,
Yeah.
15, and they are spread out. And I'm actually not even kidding. Like, he can't even name his siblings because he does so many. He literally can't. And so because they're so spread out, no one had ever married outside of the Pakistani culture. So it was completely foreign. So obviously, if you're going to come and you're going to rock the boat a little bit, like, there's going to be resistance there. And there was for a really long time, like 5 years,
Mhm.
5 long years.
Yeah.
But again, like, now that I am a parent myself, we have 2 kids of our own now. Alhamdulillah. I see it. Like, I get what the concern was, not
I'm like,
you,
what?
not you, but in general, I get the concern that the parents had, right? They were worried about a multitude of things, like so many things, like, their culture is like this, or your culture is like this. And what if he does this? And, it's their whole life. Like, we grew up in the West. So obviously, it's not, we're Canadian. We obviously say we're Canadian, but it's not our country. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're growing up amongst people that are non-Muslim. So they've always just seen the non-Muslim side of things, and that's what worried them. So I get it.
Especially where we're from, because there's like 40,000 people and like
Yeah,
this many Muslims. So
like none.
there really is
Yeah.
like there really is like a big
Yeah.
community. So
No, it's not. Yeah. So totally see that.
mhm.
Well, I have a very important follow-up question for Muhammad. What's your favorite Pakistani dish?
Uh, it's tough. I'm a butter chicken guy. And I know it's not
Ooh.
technically, it could be Indian, whatever, but she makes an amazing butter chicken. Is my favorite.
Thank you.
Brownie points. So I'm gonna say butter chicken, but like a really spicy biryani is like right up there
Yeah,
as well.
you like biryani a lot too.
Yeah, I like
I would
spicy.
So
say
you
I
like
would say that
spicy?
I love spicy
he
food.
eats
Ooh,
more
nice.
spice than I do. Isn't that weird? Like, I can't handle heat like he can. I always tell the medium. He's like, make it as hot, like deathly as hot as you can.
But it has
So,
to be flavorful. Can't just like hot. It's gotta have good flavor to it. So.
yeah. I don't even know what that means, but okay.
So, did your marriage cause any ill from your family towards Brother Muhammad? And how did you deal with that? And what do you recommend as possible solutions?
So I feel like we worked all of that out prior to getting married, alhamdulillah.
Mhm.
We got to a point where we became engaged, I guess you could say, but we had a nikah, so it's not really an engagement, it's a full marriage.
Yeah.
Before we had the actual wedding. But everybody at that point when this happened was like 100% on board.
Okay.
There were a couple things that we did during the wedding that kind of ticked off some of my family. That has actually nothing to do with the culture.
Yeah.
It had to
Oh.
do with you kind of being an extremist. I mean, it's true, right? Should
Yeah,
I
it's
mention
true.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had our wedding. He went to Pakistan. He was part of the Tablighi Jamaat. He's a new Muslim, and so we decided to have our wedding with zero music and zero men and women
Yeah, it was separate.
interacting. It was completely separate. A separate banquet hall for me and the women, and a separate banquet hall for the men. Which is like, even Pakistani people like don't do that. Like, Pakistani people are like straight up mixed. So even like most of my family was on board, but I had one sister that was not very happy about it.
Yeah.
To the point where it was a bit of a shuffle. But looking back at that now, we're not like that anymore.
Mhm.
Obviously, we've grown. I mean,
I
you've
mean,
grown.
I think that's to be said, right? That like for myself, I mean, it's just to kind of go off on a quick tangent, is that
Mhm,
I was exposed to a very rigid version of Islam in the beginning, and
mhm.
alhamdulillah, I'm so thankful for that, because it really enabled me to kind of be
Learn.
strict on myself, so to speak. And that, I think, kind of enabled me to come to where I am today, and spending time with scholars and understanding the religion itself. But yeah, definitely it was a, but I look back on it now, honestly, and I don't, there's definitely room in the faith. I mean, for those of you who didn't check out Imam Mazhar's TikTok video today, he was mentioning some of the great companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and they would walk into a gathering, and everyone would stop playing music and instruments, and they would just stop, and they're big giant scholars, and they would say, "I'm not going to sit down until you guys start playing again. Like, what is this?" Or another one, huge scholar, his name has slipped my mind, but he went to a wedding, and this is quite like us. He went to a wedding, and there was no music, no singing, no nothing. And he said to the people, he said,
What's
like
wrong
what
with
is
you?
this? Like you guys
Yeah.
are doing a janaza here or what? He's like, where's the music and the singing and the livelihood, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, our
obviously,
wedding
had
was
I
a
known,
little quiet,
yeah,
a little bit quiet.
if I known what I know now back then, it would have been a different story. But
Yeah, yeah.
that was kind of the big thing, was a little bit touchy in the beginning, but I
Mhm.
think for all in all, it was honestly, like she said, we
Mhm.
worked out a lot of
The kinks.
the kinks
Yeah.
beforehand, so it really made
Mhm.
the marriage kind of
Yeah,
seamless.
alhamdulillah, it was great. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So a lot of communication then.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
like a lot.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
More than
awesome.
most people would need.
Yeah.
That's nice to know.
Mhm.
Do you know how many Rishta aunties would be so angry listening to you right now? On like a segregate. It's like, what?
How are we supposed to
I
find
know,
them?
right? How are we supposed to find? Yeah, that's so true. I
It is,
know. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I would think we were one of the first people to, we are the only people
yeah.
to ever do that where we're from. Like, I don't think anyone did that in BC.
Yeah. Well, and not in BC, but at least where we're from, for sure,
Yeah.
we're the first. But
Mhm.
hey, we hold the record, so
Yeah.
it stands. We're number one.
Hold that trophy.
Also, the first people to have nikah in our masjid there. The new
Yeah,
masjid. So,
that's true.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah. That was cool.
But it's, yeah, that's actually a funny point. Is that, I mean, if you were to name all of your friends who are married now, how many of them got married because they met someone at a wedding? Like everybody that I know, honestly, like for the
Yeah,
most
that's
part,
actually
it's
really true. That's actually really
yeah,
true. Yeah, for the
it
most
is.
part. Hmm.
Wow. I wonder if you get ajr for that, like matching other people because of your own wedding. But
Maybe.
that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to sort of transition in more into compatibility because I feel like compatibility is a bit of a general term people use. I feel like there's a lot of things that go into it. So, for example, familial compatibility, that's obviously important. And then, as you mentioned, like religious compatibility, being on the same page with respect to whether you want things segregated, whether you want to have music or not, like things like that, that is very important. And other things like, having similar hobbies, like, doing a podcast together, having the same sort of like wavelength of humor. Like, I feel like that also comes under compatibility. So could you maybe speak to that a little bit and maybe talk about like what are the types of compatibility that are actually important for like a long-term sustainable marriage and what people should look for when they're like, analyzing a potential.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel like we're both on the same page for so many things, even if we might differ on certain things, but we still, it's like, it's almost like, when you have a puzzle and the puzzle pieces are completely different, but they fit together perfectly. I feel like that's us. And
Yeah,
I
I
know that
mean,
sounds really corny, but it's like we're different, we're really different, but we fit together perfectly.
yeah, in
Like,
terms of like compatibility, I think that again, it comes back to an individual and how badly they want something. So, for example, like in terms of like our interests, we are nothing alike.
no,
We do not like anything of the same
no,
at all.
no.
We're so different, and just every
Mashallah.
bit of who we are as people, we're so different.
Yeah.
And that's why people say like opposites attract. Like,
Mhm.
I guess maybe there's some wisdom behind that, because for
Mhm.
sure, like when we met, there was just like instant chemistry that didn't
Mhm.
rely on any type of
What we liked or didn't
similarities
like,
or
or
anything.
yeah.
And then from that, yeah, the compatibility, I think, comes along in terms of our, like, you're kind of, when it gets deeper beyond the surface level of just meeting someone, because compatibility, it can be molded, I feel like. If you don't like something but I like that thing, well, then we'll find a compromise.
Yeah, we
Or
always
I'll
do.
have the time to do my thing, you'll have the time to do your thing.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, this is my perspective, but that communication kind of supersedes
Mhm.
everything else.
Mhm.
That certainly compatibility, right? If you may not be compatible, and then, I mean, there's, like you said, there's different levels of compatibility. That, well, are we compatible with the things that we like, or are we compatible with our future goals as well? Which I
Mhm.
think that maybe a lot of people don't discuss.
Mhm.
And that's I don't know if I should tell everybody, but I think we did a TikTok video about it, so it's okay. But like the night that we met, she said, that she believes that God puts people in our path for a reason. And she said, like, I wonder what this reason is. And my response as an arrogant human being was that, well, we're supposed to get married and have lots of kids. Right. So I had already started planning so far ahead.
I was like, what?
I'm definitely using that like every time I meet someone.
That's it, man. You never know
Every time.
what's the worst that can happen.
Damn.
That's so true. But like if you like for instance, let's give an example. So we're like let's say we're going to the mall. He is a huge fan of all things like manhood. So he loves like the guns, the hunting, the outdoorsy stuff, and I'm like so not like that. So we'll go to the mall and we'll compromise. So he gets to have his time at Bass Pro and then we'll go shopping, you know what I mean? And like do stuff that I like to do. But it's like we always make time for each other's things. Like we always make sure we're never like I'm not never doing that, or you know,
Yeah.
like we always make time for both things. Even though we're completely the opposite, we still make sure
Yeah.
we're
Yeah. I
on
think that
par.
compatibility itself, um, because you're never really gonna know. Like for example, especially with like the Muslim style of kind of not arranging a marriage, but you guys know what I'm talking about in terms of having,
Mhm.
you know, people who understand both sides and they're trying to find compatible matches for people. You're never gonna know whether you're compatible in how you sleep, right? I
Right.
mean, like as silly as that is, right? It's a big thing. It's I mean, you
Yeah.
sleep 8 hours of your day, like
Yeah.
so many years of your life,
Yeah.
that you just have to address it as it comes and
Yeah.
do the best to kind of work together
Yeah.
to find that happy medium.
Yep.
Seems
Yep.
to work for us anyway. I don't know if it's for everybody or just us, but
Yeah. And that's like that's literally everything,
yeah,
whether it's the hobbies, whether it's things that we like to
yeah.
do and
And like
yeah.
the compromise, right? Like we have a king size bed. I have about this much of it, and she has the rest of it, and it works.
Oh God. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. We can talk about
But
that.
we make it work, right? This is what it is.
We always make it work and you don't complain. That's the awesome part about it, right?
Compromise.
It's compromise.
Oh God, that's funny. Um, Sana, you're a social worker, right? Oh,
Was,
nice.
yes.
Oh,
Yes.
was okay.
Yeah.
Well, I had a question about related to your field. So a lot of couples and a lot of like scholars, they recommend like couples counseling even at the beginning of a marriage, and they highly recommend it even if you think you really know the person like that
Mhm.
really well. What do you
Mhm.
think of that?
Okay, so coming from a personal perspective, not as a
Mm-hmm.
social worker, but as a
Mm-hmm.
personal thing, I like at the start of a marriage, I would feel really uncomfortable talking to
Mm-hmm.
someone about my potential spouse. But that's just
Mm-hmm.
personally me. I feel like that's a private thing and
Mm-hmm.
I would personally just want to talk it out with you. I wouldn't want to have like a third person there to just like mediate whatever, and I feel like we never really had any problems anyway to begin with, like we were just on the same page. But as a social worker, if I'm looking through that social worker lens, it for people that are kind of struggling on some certain things and have like some kind of a conflict, I can see it working.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't, I as a like myself, I personally wouldn't start my marriage off by getting outside help, because then it's always going to
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need outside help, you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like as a married couple, you kind of need to just figure things out, and you have to learn that throughout your whole marriage there's going to be ups and downs,
Mm-hmm.
and you just have to learn how to just get back up again together,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
right?
totally
So
agree.
Yeah. When I first saw, I think it was on TikTok when I first saw it, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that because I'm like that just builds a
mm,
lack of trust. So
yeah,
yeah.
and it's always feeling like you have to like tell a third person,
Mm-hmm.
and then you never like I just don't feel comfortable like myself
Mm-hmm.
like telling someone something so personal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't know if they're going to go and tell somebody else, or they're not bound by the same kind of
Mm-hmm.
things that social workers or professionals are
Mm-hmm.
like bound by, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes me uncomfortable.
I would respectfully disagree to some degree.
Yeah.
I would think that okay, talking about these sort of things prior to actually getting married, I could see where it becomes a little bit more uncomfortable and like slightly problematic. But the way I look at it is more of like when Yasmin mentioned like marriage counseling, I look at it more as like a prevention rather than cure sort of thing. And so if you can sort of like maybe like go like every 4 or 6 months and sort of like talk about like some of the struggles that you're going through, even if they're not like at a magnitude so large that it would bring up the idea of like a divorce or anything like that. I think if you have those sort of like checkpoints, I would think like early on in a marriage, it would allow you to sort of like have that discourse at like a more meaningful level and not let things escalate and sort of build up. That's the way I look at it. I'm single, so maybe what
But
do
it's
I
still,
know?
no, but it's still great advice. But I think to add an asterisk into to what you said, I agree with you. But I think it kind of differs because it depends on the actual people themselves. Because, for
Mm-hmm.
example, right, we met, we were working together, we got to know each other, and we decided that's what we want. It's much different than if you have two people who may not know each other very well, right? In terms of not,
Mm-hmm.
again, people, we're going to say arranged marriage, you're going to cut a clip and it's going to be all over YouTube that we, support arranged marriages or whatever. But for two people who may not know each other very well, that it's definitely, I think you couldn't go wrong in that sense, that having help, because you may not know how to deal with something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially, like you said, that's the ability to speak about something to someone who's more qualified. Obviously we're talking about qualified people, to give their opinion, and obviously people who have been through an assortment of different issues. I think it really would depend on the actual people. Like, because for myself,
Mm-hmm.
like there's no way, even if we had a problem, because I mean every marriage has a problems,
Mm-hmm.
and you sort it out. But I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
take benefit in it just because I would never do it. Like
Yeah,
that's
same.
just me. That's just my culture of kind of how I grew up, and my parents, and their marriage and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Whereas
I
I
think,
grew up with the opposite though,
well, that's what I'm
because my
saying.
parents had that outside help,
Yeah,
but I felt like they never. The thing is for my parents, like I felt like they never got to work things out because they would always rely on somebody else, and when
to
that
come in
somebody
at the
else
time.
wasn't there, they wouldn't talk about it.
Hmm.
Whereas like you and me, it doesn't matter how hard it is, we always
Yeah.
talk about it and we confront each other, right? So I don't know, I it's tricky.
There's a
I feel
difference of
like
opinion on this topic. We're gonna have to agree to disagree. But
What's the
no,
majority opinion?
that's it.
yeah.
We have none. We accept all opinions. If you need help, seek help. And
Yeah.
if you guys can do it alone, then do it alone. But
Yeah, for sure.
definitely, if that would be my advice, is that if you think that it's something bigger than what you can handle, don't let
Mm-hmm.
it just simmer.
Yeah.
Find help, and because at the end of the day, right, we don't want to lose our marriage or what we have.
Hmm.
Therefore, if it gets to a point where, like you said, that even if there's maybe not that many issues or whatever, go and talk to somebody, because it certainly could be beneficial
Yeah.
for your marriage.
Yeah.
I agree with that aspect. Yes.
Hmm.
3-on-1,
That's
great.
it. Majority opinion. You have it.
Mm-hmm.
But like in Islam, the majority opinion in terms of fiqh, majority opinion is a fallacy, because wherever you are in time can be a majority, can be a minority on the same topic. So really,
Yeah.
tomorrow we're going to agree with you, and it's going to be, the majority is going to be flipped. So
Actually, side tangent on that. So, Yasmin and I, like the MSA we attend, they have these halakas on Monday, and I actually asked the sheikh about this, and he actually had a very interesting perspective. He said instead of thinking of it as opinions, you should think of them as positions. Right? There are positions in Islam, and you can choose whichever one that you're more comfortable choosing, as long
absolutely,
as
Hmm.
you know your intentions for choosing them. And I
that's
think
it,
Hmm.
that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah,
for sure.
that's so true. And we always give the example of like looking at a glass. Everybody's gonna look at the glass differently, but it's the same thing. Like
Okay,
everybody's
she
seeing
gives
it
this
differently.
reference all the time, but she just leaves out like the, if it,
I heard it in your podcast as well.
yeah,
And
if
you
you,
called me out for
I
it. You
have
always
to. This
do.
is, I'm the one that told you this. This is my analogy, right?
So then give the analogy
It,
then.
a glass of water that is half, it's got half liquid in it, right?
Half
Is it half
liquid.
full or half empty? Well, it's depending. If you saw me and I was filling it up, you would say that that glass is half full. But if
Hmm.
someone else is seeing me and I've drank now half of it, they're going to say it's half empty.
Yeah.
So it's all about perspective, right?
Yeah.
And again,
And
Allah,
I'm gonna look at it and say, who's been drinking my water?
probably me. But like you said, like Allah rewards according to intention. So as long as your intention is pure and you genuinely want
Yeah.
what is good, then the reward will be there for you.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay, now getting into talking a little bit about like the financial aspect of a marriage, and this is something that I've actually had a lot of conversations with my dad about, and I feel like a lot of young Muslims like our age who are thinking of getting married, like there's just like maybe they're in university, leaving university, whatever, they either overemphasize or underemphasize the importance of marriage. So I remember like me when I would have a conversation with my dad, he would be like, you getting married isn't really the problem. It's more the how are you going to sustain this person, because
Mhm.
you're still in school, I still have like a couple years to go, right? My family isn't in like, they don't live in like mansions, we don't have like that kind of money to like support like
Of course.
another family. And so
Hmm.
he's like, if your to be wife wants to like go out to a movie, go out to a restaurant, all of those things, like you have to make sure that happens. And if you
Mhm.
don't, then you're not fulfilling the rights of your wife, and that's even a bigger problem, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like a lot of people, they're like, oh, don't worry, we're just gonna like live in my parents' basement or like whatever, and they don't actually give it the thought that it needs. And then there's people on the other end of the spectrum that have like ridiculous expectations of like the type of lifestyle they want to live. They're like, I want like 5 kids, all of them have to go to private school. I want to make sure that I have drive like a Lamborghini. You can have a BMW. We're gonna have live in like a 10-story house and like
Yep.
the whole shebang. So from a couple's perspective who has been married, what are your thoughts on like, financial compatibility?
I think
Mhm.
it's an interesting one for us. It's an interesting paradigm. Um, Before we got married, or even as we got married, um, like I was working at a slaughterhouse, right? So and then
A
that
halal slaughterhouse.
yeah, a halal slaughterhouse, right?
The Haram
Alhamdulillah.
police is wondering.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Um, so like I didn't have like this massive bank account and all this money put away for what I had envisioned life to be. Um, Thankfully, her parents entrusted her to me. Um, which, if they saw my bank account, they probably would have been like, no. um, but you know what? In terms of that, like we really worked on the financial compatibility part of it together, right?
Mhm.
Because we sat down and we said, okay, what is our kind of our goal? What is our trajectory? Where do we want to
Mhm.
get to be? And so for me, so she, when we got
Me,
married,
she.
me, she, when we got married, you were already working as a social
Yeah,
worker,
I was.
right?
Yeah.
So and so we said, you know what, I like myself, I said I want to be something more than what I am.
Mhm.
So with the support of her and the
Mhm.
fact that in the Pakistani family, if you're not a doctor or an engineer, you're not part of the family. um, so my mother-in-law happened to come across an ad in the newspaper for an aircraft maintenance engineer, and I think she just saw the engineer part, so she's like, go and check this out.
Yeah.
So we
I
went.
remember you went and you're like, nope, not
Yeah,
happening.
no.
Not gonna do it.
But I ended up going, and it was like just to sit down and kind of tell you about the programs and stuff. So I decided that that was a good path to take.
Mhm.
And then so I started school, and then like my summer break, our firstborn was born. Our first child was born.
So
Um,
all that time that you were in school, I was the breadwinner, which
exactly.
is like so like the opposite of
Exactly.
what it
And
usually
then
is.
you know what? And then and I always take solace in the words of Allah in terms of in the Quran where he talks about, don't have fear of
Yes.
children because it is
Yeah.
me that is going to provide.
And that's
Um,
so true because I remember how worried we were.
mhm,
We're like, oh my God, you're in school. Like we
yeah.
got pregnant. Like, what are we gonna
And I think
do?
it was like school, and
Yeah.
then you went on mat leave.
Yeah.
So it was like maternity leave was getting us through. Luckily, we have
Hmm.
we have her family just to be there for us in terms of help and that sort of stuff. But it was really, we kind of set that where we want to be in 5 years and 10 years, and you know what? Every step of the way, Alhamdulillah,
Hmm.
it just worked out exactly as we had
Yeah.
planned for the most part. It was like go to school, do my apprenticeship. As soon as I get my license, I got my license on like day one, and then it was like next step is contracting. And so as soon as that came about, it was like within a
Yeah.
few months, or like
Yeah.
not even a year, I was out contracting, and that's why actually we moved out here. And then it was like COVID happened, so now you have to completely readjust your goals,
Everything.
right?
Yeah.
Because I got laid off in April, and I think I did a
Hmm.
2 week job in Montreal in the summer, but since then, like I haven't worked. And Toronto is not cheap. It's not a cheap
Hmm.
place to live.
Hmm.
um,
Mhm.
and so but it's us here now, and so we really kind of came up with the idea. She came up with the idea for Lala Hijabs, and we just kind of took it and went, and it just,
Exploded.
yeah, so I think it's,
Hmm.
I don't necessarily, I don't agree either way, either extreme. Like right in the middle is that we came, when we got married, it was like, this is what we have, we put everything on the table,
Hmm.
but these are our aspirations.
Hmm. And I feel like couples should never put an expectation on each other because it's never going to work out that way. Like you have zero control over like getting pregnant and having a child. You have
Yeah.
zero control over getting laid off. You have zero
COVID.
control over a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like there's absolutely no control in that sense. So, and you always just have to remember Allah is the best of planners and Allah is the
Mhm.
best of providers. And you have to, there comes a time where you just have to put your trust in Allah and just like always remember that um it's, you know, things are only going to be okay. Like things get hard, but things get better. And Allah, like I said, is the best of planners. So
And like Allah says, is that I haven't burdened you with anything that you can't handle, right? So we really,
Mhm.
you kind of take that and you say, you know what, as hard as it may be, because I mean, like with a pandemic, like I mean, everything was turned upside down, and we were like,
yeah.
how are we gonna even like make? We have to move back home, and how are we
Like
gonna
what are
do
we gonna
that?
do?
It's
Yeah.
right. So you have to be willing to make sacrifices and adjust on the fly in order to kind of, you know what, cut costs here so that we can kind of do this. And then I think if you do that and you're on the same page, right? Because a lot of times you'll have people who like hide their finances, or you have a bank account over here and you have one over here, and I'm not
There
to say
should
there's
be,
anything
yeah.
wrong with that, but at the same time,
But I feel like you should be really, like, for us, we're so
yeah,
transparent about everything. There's like zero hiding anything.
yeah.
And we love that.
And it helps because
Yeah.
we both know where we're at, like
Mhm.
financially, right?
Mhm.
Um, so one person might be stressing in a case where it isn't like that. One the person is stressing so much, but the other person has this, you know, other bank account, so they're not so concerned about it. But I think, you know,
Mhm.
having that communication about,
Mhm.
especially about finances,
Transparency.
is huge, because I mean, like you guys know, like financial issues can destroy a marriage quite
Mhm.
easily.
Literally, yeah. And
Um,
I feel like that transparency is key,
mhm,
because a majority of the marriages that fail due to financial difficulties or to financial hardships, it's because there was no communication on either side. So
mhm,
one person's like, I wish I could have such and such and such. And the other one's like, I'm not giving that to you because I'm saving up, or I'm not going to tell you what we have, or you know what I mean? Like it's just,
mhm.
there's always this huge divide on either side, and there's no communication. So if there's going to be no communication, you cannot expect either side to work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that. So you know how like like the Muslim model of like getting to know somebody,
Mhm.
if in the event that you don't, it's like a setup like from your parents or family friends, or like, you know, maybe at a wedding, you know, I don't know. And so how do you like break that ice and talk about finances, and like like to what degree do you talk about it? Because there's some people that are very conservative and like very like they don't want to
Mhm.
disclose like how much they're making and like, you know, what their
Yeah.
family situation is like, etc. But then other people, they might have like crazy expectations and we'd be like, oh, I want someone who earns like 80K a year minimum, right?
Mhm.
It's like, how do you
Mhm.
kind of go about that?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think that, like personally, that would be the most imperative time to be open and
Mhm.
honest about it, right? Because, like for example, as a father, if I'm looking at a potential, you know, suitor for my child, um, that's going to be big, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna want to know that my daughter is going to be okay.
Mhm.
But at the same time, if you're going to tell me and be honest with me that, you know what, I'm between jobs, or I have aspirations, or this is what I would like to do, you know, it makes it much easier to kind of discuss, and then set a plan, right? Like if you say, I don't have any money, but I know I'm going to school in 4 months from now, I've already paid for that, whatever, um, then I think it makes it a lot easier. And in terms of like to sit down, I don't, well, obviously we didn't really have that because we knew each other beforehand, but I think that it could be just catastrophic. And you know
Mhm.
what? I've to some extent kind of witnessed that, where you have people with unreasonable expectations, but
Mhm.
they didn't sort it out beforehand, and then
Mhm.
things didn't work out because, you know, like you said, my expectation is here, and what you can give to me is here,
Mhm.
and it's going to be like one of those things where you get married and then you're just shaking your head because you're just not compatible that way.
Mhm.
So I think, as much as it may be like whether it's
Awkward or
embarrassing or awkward,
mhm.
you have to kind of lay all your cards out on the table.
Mhm. Yeah, I fully agree with that statement. I feel like transparency should be key from the very beginning, because a marriage is, it's so much about trusting each other. And if there's no trust in the very beginning, and if you feel like you can't even approach the person about it, I feel like there's going to be an issue, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
It's got to be trust. So
Yeah. I just want to reiterate like your previous points on like, you know, like the way you guys managed your money and everything like that. I have older siblings and I've seen their friends as well, and their case was very similar to yours, and I strongly believe that Allah always will help you. Allah subhanahu wa
mhm.
ta'ala will always help you, and he will always be there for you. And I've
Mhm.
also seen like extreme cases where people don't have that trust, and they'll be like, oh, like the female will go like very extra, and she'll be like, my money is my money, and I just paid for groceries, and you need to e-transfer me this amount. Like, yeah,
Oh,
and those marriages haven't worked out, unfortunately. But
yeah.
it's gotten, it's like I've heard stories that have gone that far, and it's very
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah, I also know people that have struggled to the point where like they've messaged me saying like, "Oh, my husband just bought a giant truck and didn't tell me and didn't consult me."
Not me.
And no, not you, but things like that. But then you look at it and you're like, "Whoa, like you didn't know about that?" And she's like, "Absolutely not. Like we clearly don't talk enough that you would go out and buy a vehicle. Like that's huge.
big.
Like how could you not share that?" And then how can you expect a marriage to work if you're not going to even talk,
Yeah,
about that
and
kind of
I
stuff.
think like you have to have that. Um, I don't know what the word would be, but you have to kind of have that feeling in your heart that if I'm going to make a decision on my own, I have to
Mhm.
take into account everybody that it relies on me, or
Mhm.
vice versa.
Mhm.
Like buying a truck, I'm like, man, I'm like, I need to buy a new speed bag, but it's like $60. I'm like, well, can I wait? Can I do this? Should we
Yeah.
talk about it, right? So
Yeah.
it's even if it's a small thing, I think that
Mhm.
you need to be,
Communication.
yeah, transparent
Always communication. That's like the biggest piece of advice for any couple ever is just
about
talk.
anything. Yeah,
Literally just talk. Even if it hurts, even if you
yeah.
feel like it's going to hurt the other person, you need to talk because if you're not putting it out into the open, you're just going to cause some kind of trouble
It
later
will
on.
it will come back and bite you in the end,
Mhm.
honestly.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think every person who has a successful marriage, they say exactly that. You need to have like a very strong sense of communication. You need to make sure you're
Mhm.
open with each other. And I don't know if you have time to get into this, but I always wondered like what is the line between communication and like complaining? Because like, like
It's right
there's
here.
Oh
uh,
gosh. Oh, I
but
complain all the time. And yeah, I do. And so do you though. Like
It's her
we
form of communication.
yes,
okay.
basically.
No,
If yeah, if the
yeah,
garbage doesn't get taken out, he will hear about it.
but
More than once.
but sometimes but sometimes I just won't take it out because I know she's going to complain about it, and I just,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I think it is a fine line, but at the end of the day, um, that accepting of each other's personalities and who you are. I mean, everybody complains, some more than others,
Mm-hmm.
but
Oh, ha,
um, but you know what? We live our life with a lot of humor as well.
Yeah,
We
we
really
do.
try to make each other laugh
Yeah,
and not be miserable. Even when the other person's angry, we'll try to do something to kind of
yeah,
uplift their spirits. Or
yeah,
even if someone's if she's mad at me or what, or vice versa, then I we always try to kind of break the ice and get through it. So
hmm.
people are going to complain. That's just,
It's just how it
yeah,
is.
you just have to live with it.
Like you the other day trying to figure something out on your phone. It was like your Apple ID or something wasn't working. And you're like, oh, I have to call like Apple ID and this is like, oh, it's just not working. And instead of asking me, you're complaining, saying that you can't figure this thing out. I'm like, well, can I just see your phone? Can I just try and do it? You're like, but oh, I just can't figure it out. I'm like, did you try to restart your phone? Like, of course I did. And then he goes over here and like restarts his phone and then fixed it. Do you remember that?
Sometimes you have to know when you're wrong, and you have to
And you
admit
have
it.
to admit that you're
I
wrong.
mean, I wasn't wrong, but we'll just let her believe that.
Oh, it's so funny. Yes. So yeah.
Well, if this is any representation of how you guys go about your daily life, then I have no doubt you guys have a very healthy and very happy marriage. Alhamdulillah.
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 Mashallah.
Jazakum khair. That's pretty accurate, honestly.
It's
Like
pretty accurate.
it's just kind of how we always are.
Yeah.
But again, I wouldn't want to set unreasonable expectations for people,
Mm-hmm.
because not everybody's the same. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
my sense of humor is, eh, I don't know. I always try to live with it because I don't like to be miserable. I don't like to be upset. And I've lived my whole life kind of being a shoulder for people to cry on or whatever. So it's always about uplifting people and making them feel better. And a lot of times it's through humor. But you know what? It's like
Yep.
people, they're just not that way. So you kind of have to find that
Mm-hmm.
medium that you can use to get through those difficult situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and to be quite honest, is it may not always work out the way that we want it to.
Yeah.
But in the end, like sister was saying, that Allah is the best of planners, and we have to kind of accept at times, unfortunately, we have to accept that things just may not work out how we want them to.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On that note, I feel like because we are in Canada, it's a very like multicultural society. The idea of like when you're considering a potential only to be like focused on like within your own culture, like sort of like same like geographic location and whatnot, is like at least with our generation, it's like it's going away. And
Mhm.
so like for me, for example, like if I look at somebody, like for me, the first thing is like in terms of like how their character and their deen is, not necessarily like are they from Africa, Middle East, or South Asia. It's
Mhm.
like for me it doesn't really matter, but unfortunately there are a lot of people whose parents still have that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of young people who have potential spouses in mind, and between the two of them they want to get married, but they face a lot of obstacles, whether it be from parents, like from either side, or just like in general like from their community. And there's a lot of successful cases, alhamdulillah, such as the two of you, but there's a lot of unsuccessful ones that obviously, they aren't publicized, right? So I'm curious to sort of understand your thoughts on at what point in this journey, and what are some like indicators that would point to a person thinking like, okay, you know what, like this is it, like I have to rethink this person, and maybe actually isn't going to work out. Because some people go like, as you mentioned, like in your case, like five years, and just like being diligent and continuing to be determined that it's going to work out. But then other people who might be like in their like mid 30s, like 5 years, they can't afford that because like
Mm-hmm.
the clock is
True.
ticking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a hard thing to answer because I feel like in Islam, n- no one can object like Islamically to
Mhm.
a marriage if they're both Muslim, they're both good people, you know what I mean? Like they can't there's no objection in terms of culture. Like it's not a thing. It shouldn't be a thing.
Mhm.
In today's day and age it definitely seems to be for a lot of people. Culture you know, intercultural marriages are seen as, foreign, I guess you could say. But if the couple are, I'll use the word, like if they're in love and they feel like this is the spouse for them, I would say pursue it with the intention of having patience. And I know that's like really, really, really hard, especially if it goes on for years. But you kind of have to like you kind of have to figure out what needs to be done. Like, is it the parents that need convincing? Like, who can speak to them? Like, is it going to be an imam? Like, is it going to be somebody that's going to come into the picture and make things easier? Like, what is the problem? And like address the problem head on, I think.
Yeah.
I just
Sorry,
sorry,
go
I'm
ahead.
just gonna cut you off for like 1 second. When you say pursue it, I just wanna
Mhm.
make sure you mentioned like pursuing it in like that, like not like get eloped. It's more like in the
No, no,
halal manner,
no. No,
continuing
no,
to be
no.
like
Pursue as
pursuing.
in
Yeah,
like
Don't run away.
no,
Don't run
pursue
away.
as in
exactly. Yeah,
stay
Be
consistent in,
diligent.
right.
yeah, stay consistent in that this is the spouse that I want to marry. How can I make this happen? How can I convince my parents? How can I convince their parents? How
Correct.
can I make everyone happy? Like what is the problem here and can we like address the problem, you
That's
know?
your with S personality. Have to make everyone
Yes,
happy.
I'm an S personality.
So from a D
Everybody,
personality,
yeah.
um, and I
D
think
is dominant. They're those people that are like gotta just do it.
yeah,
Like don't even think twice. Yeah.
yeah. See, so for example, right? I think this is a good kind of story to help with that question. Is that in the beginning, her mom was absolutely against. Sorry, I have a kid's hair tie on my finger. If you can notice that. Um, so her mom was completely against us. Um,
Mhm.
now, what we need to understand as I mean, not me because I'm third generation here, but for a lot of people is that their parents are from a different country, they're from a different culture. Um, is that at the end of the day, if your parents are kind of putting that on you that no, this isn't going to be this way, they're doing it because they really care about you. I'm not from a culture where that happens, and I'm from a culture where anything goes and the kids have the say and there's no interjection by the parents. And I
Mhm.
have seen and witnessed through my own family and friends like this the destruction of families and children's
Mhm.
lives and
Because they don't
everything
care about the parents
because
being
there
on board.
isn't that care from the parents. I'm not saying they
Mhm.
don't care, but the culture is different.
Mhm.
So because in the beginning her mom was so against it, I took a step back and I said, okay, obviously it's because she cares, right? That she
Mm-hmm.
would want to protect her child and from everything else. So what is it that I can do myself to
To
help
make her say
relieve
yes.
that
Yeah.
burden that she feels of having to let her child go? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I did. And I spent 5 years, it wasn't like we just spent 5 years apart. We each spent 5 years working on ourselves to show
To
her
get to that
her
point.
family,
Yeah.
and whether that be working on my iman and my faith and spending time in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and really working, and by the time we got married, um, I mean, I was leading the prayers in the mosque, giving lectures to the non-Muslims and the Muslims, and really showing that I I'm not the scary thing that she thought I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that if you want it to happen, you can make it happen, but you can't just sit and just I want it, I want it, I want it without doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Without finding the solution to the problem,
exactly.
which is there's obviously a problem. If there's objections on either side, there's a problem. Like, what is the issue, and can you address that problem?
Yeah, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
our story is kind of the shining light for a lot of people that it can work,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a firm believer, just because our lives have turned out how it has,
Mm-hmm.
that if you want it to work, you can make it to work. But what I see, unfortunately, is people think they want it to work, but they're not willing to put in the effort to make it work.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and you know what, and it took, for us, it took 5 years, but it took 5 years of hard work,
Mm-hmm.
um, so that it removed the concerns of the parents, and
Mm-hmm.
they said, you know what, we see what the progression that you've both made, and that you're serious about this, that you have our blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's honestly the biggest takeaway, is that if you really wanted to, and that's the key part, is that if you really wanted to, you'd be willing to put in the 5 years, however long it might be. But if at the beginning of you coming together, and you say, oh, I'm so in love, whatever, but I'm not willing to step away from you for years, and if need
Mm-hmm.
be, to make it work, to better myself, or to fix whatever kind of
Mm-hmm.
understandings they have about me or about us.
Mm-hmm.
So
And not to say that it would take 5 years for
yeah.
everybody, but I mean, people can fix a problem in 2 weeks. People can fix a problem in 6 months. Like, it's different for
Mhm.
everybody depending on what it is. Like, maybe there's an objection of a career that someone has. Okay, so find a different career. Like, how can we do that? And I just feel like if they're very committed, like the thing is when there's a couple on either side and they feel very strongly for the other person and they feel like this is the person I want to spend my whole life with, it's really hard for that couple to separate and then find someone that's going to be the same, and then hopefully there be no problems again. You know what I mean? Like, it's easier to fix something than, go and start all over again,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and if you really do think that you want it to work, you have to be willing to kind of accept the criticisms of the parents, and
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, you know what, they're saying, well, you're not financially stable, for example. What can I do to fix that? Right?
Yeah.
Whatever, you have to be able to address their concern and objections, because
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, you know what, we as Muslims, we don't break the bonds of family ties. So, and if that means that I have to put in some extra effort to ensure that, I mean, we could have easily, we could have done that. We could have ran away and got married and whatever,
And
but
then completely destroy the
we
family
would
and
never be
no
where we are today.
relationships, or yeah.
Like her mom is watching our kids right now, when we have the time to do this, because we love each other, because
Yeah.
we took the time to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And
And trusted Allah.
that's it.
Yeah,
Put your trust in Allah.
trusted the plan, prayed a ton. And you can't just expect things to just happen without asking. Like, you
Mhm.
have to ask Allah to help you,
You have to make
because
the effort.
yeah, and ultimately Allah is the one that's going to make it happen.
Like the
So
Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said, when they said, should I just tie my camel, or should I just have trust in Allah that my camel will be there? And he said, no, tie your camel first and then put your trust in Allah. And I
mhm.
think that's what we should take away from it, is that do what you have to do, and then trust in Allah. But you have to do your part first.
Yeah.
You can't just sit and make dua and hope that things are going to work. You have to be willing to put in the
Mhm,
effort.
mhm, mhm.
I had a question. So a lot of people struggle, and and especially in our South Asian culture, there's a huge communication gap. A lot of the children, they don't have communication with their parents.
Mhm.
Their parents are not their friends.
Yeah.
So a lot of them have to reach out to third parties to help with this communication. And a lot of these parents, they take offense with that, and they say that, hey, you just ruined the respect of our family, and like, why would you do such a thing, and we're even more against this now. So what are your thoughts on that, and what advice can you guys give to our viewers regarding that?
That's a tough one.
Well, for me, it doesn't exist because I'm not from that culture. But I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things, right? Because again, like I mentioned, is that your parents love you, and at the end of the day, they really truly do want what's best for you. They're not saying no, you can't marry that person because they think you're going to have a good life with them, right? It's because there's genuine concern. Um, and I think I hope maybe that the parents would partake in this podcast and listen to this, because it is a lot of it has to do with them, is that they do come from a different culture, and you're in Canada or you're in the West, because that's obviously who we're speaking about here. um, you have to make some compromises as a parent. You kind of
Both
have to
sides.
accept that you
Both
moved
sides.
here and you chose to raise your kids here. That no doubt their perception of what marriage or what the whole system is going to be like is going to be completely different than yours.
Yeah.
But for the kids themselves who are wanting to get married, communication with the parents, I think, is another huge thing that they need to understand that, and you need to be firm at some point. You need to be firm with your parents and say, look, this is what I want. I have every legal Islamic or Western right to do what I want and choose who I want and marry who I want. But at the end of the day, I do not want to do this without your blessing. So how can we work together to get that?
And
That
I
would,
think on the parent side of this, thinking about the parent side, I feel like parents need to just let go a little bit in terms of letting them, like, putting trust in them that they would only pick someone that they feel is compatible. No one is, no teenager or no high school student or college student, not high school, oh my god, college or university student, it's been a while, a university student is going to go out, find a spouse that's not compatible, and then go to their parents or go to a third party and say, hey, I want to marry this person. Like, obviously you're serious enough that you're bringing somebody else into the picture. So I think parents need to just step back a little and say, okay, so they went to this extent to get someone else involved, like I should lower my guard a little bit and like listen. Like, listening is key. Understanding where they're coming from is key. And just remember that you have to have that trust in your child, knowing that they're not going to pick someone, hopefully. I mean, there's some people out there that are a little bit questionable. You're not gonna pick someone. You're funny. You're not gonna pick someone that's not, not gonna be the one, So it's just, yeah, it's got to be on both sides. The parents just have to let go a little, which is harder, to
easier
actually
said than
accomplish.
done, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. There's no like right or wrong answer to this. I obviously haven't been through it. Who knows? Maybe I will go through it, and at that point, I might have to reach out to you once again and ask for
Always
some
welcome.
advice.
Anytime.
But I know we don't have a lot more time, so we are gonna end it here. I just wanted to open up the floor to you if you have any like last minute advice, or if you want to like clarify any like misconceptions about marriage people might have, or you might have had going into it, that now you're like, okay, this was completely whack, or oh, I now understand this is a lot more important than what I initially thought it was. But yeah, if you have any last minute wisdom, we'd love to hear it.
You have any wisdom?
So
I have to think about that one.
okay, so from me, I would say that um, your marriage will be whatever you put into it. That it'll be as good as you want to make it, and it will be as bad as you let it be. Um, and I think that for myself to give an advice to people, just from my perspective in my life and kind of where we came from, is that at the end of the day, you're, and this is why, I mean, I know like ours is a love story and stuff, but I don't necessarily believe in that love at first sight, or that
Oh, you
initial.
don't believe in love at first sight, hey?
Wait, did I tell you I did?
Maybe.
No, it's not that I don't believe in it. It's that I don't think it's applicable to everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah, I
it's
get
not
that.
that, and I don't think that two people who maybe have got set up by their aunties or whatever, it's not that I don't think that love can come from that. I think that love is something, um, in the beginning, it's this bright, new, happy thing, but it fades, right? It goes away, and it does. But what the important thing to know is that you have to always be kindling that fire. That's you have to make an effort to build love, and it's through the experiences of being married that love comes about. Like for, I mean, there's a million examples I could give, but just for one, like, you know, when our daughters were born, that just, it increases the love you have for someone. When you
Mhm.
have a death in your family, for example, like my father passed away a few years ago, she's my rock. She's there for me. She is the person that I rely on more than anybody else in this world to comfort me when I need to be, or to stand up for me, or whatever it might be. But you have to be willing to it's like I'm gonna say Tupac, but against all odds, right? That you're willing to do anything to make your marriage work.
Mhm.
And you will have ups and downs, but at
Mhm.
the end of the day, the ups are going to be far more than the downs. And your marriage will be something that you can look back on 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, and be happy at the legacy that you've left behind in terms of your children, and the success that they have, and being able to kind of grow and progress. But we should always also know that we should make a huge effort to be better than our parents. Um,
Mhm.
and that's the advice I would leave you with, is not that our parents are bad, but our parents are as good as they were capable of being. And then we should take it to the next step, and out of respect and love for them, and be that much better, and that much more understanding, and that much
Mhm.
more open to the situations.
Yeah, and similar to what you said, sister, when you were saying that there's some broken communication between parents and kids, and them not being friends with each other and stuff like that. Like we feel like we're doing things so differently with our kids.
Mhm.
We're so much like their best friends. And just like what he said, when you have kids or when you get married, try and do the exact same thing for your kids. The stuff that you wish you would have had, do that and implement that into your children, because that's really going to make a difference long term. And that's why I feel like the barriers to getting married are getting better, because now, you know, my let's say like my mom's generation or my grandmom's generation, it did not happen. It was
Mhm.
never a thing, the cross cultural marriage. But our generation, it is happening, and I feel like the next generation, it's going to be even more. We're going to have so many mixed
Yeah,
Salin
absolutely.
Salin children that are just going to be so mixed that, you know, you won't be able to tell like what each person is, like what the race is of
Yeah.
that child. But and that's the thing, is like we just have to always remember that life is ever changing and we have to change with it. So if that means our parents have to kind of change a little bit, if that means we have to change a little bit, everybody just has to kind of work on themselves.
Mhm.
And ultimately, just remember that in the end, you're going to be living that life and you want to make everybody happy. So, yeah.
There's the yes personality again. Make everybody happy. Love it.
Yes.
Uh, that was some really good last minute wisdom. I will definitely have to re-listen to it and like actually analyze it and understand it. Because that was really good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you
I
for having us.
Of course, it was our pleasure, and hopefully this is not the last time that we will be chatting to each other. We can hopefully keep in touch, and
Absolutely.
who knows, maybe we can do another episode together.
Yes,
Inshallah.
We're always
inshallah.
open.
Um,
We're always here.
Okay,
but
awesome.
I just want to end this off by saying thank you once again for both of you being here.
Thank
And
you.
we hope whoever's listening to this did enjoy this conversation. I personally benefited a lot from it. And a lot of the things that we talked about aren't things that people generally do talk about.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so hopefully, if anyone is going through that sort of scenario, they can sort of implement some of the advice given by Sana and Muhammad. I'm sorry if we let anyone down. This isn't like the stereotypical, like, oh, how did you meet sort of thing, because
We can
there's
find that story. It's no
Yeah.
problem. It's there. This is
check
far
out
more important.
and yeah, check out their podcast. They have some really, really good content, and I would highly, highly recommend it. So we're gonna end it here. Thank you very
Awesome.
much once again for joining, and whoever's listening for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode, inshallah.
All
All right.
right.
Thank you so much, guys.
Inshallah.
Okay,
Take care.
Thank
Assalamu
you so much,
alaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
guys. Assalamu alaikum.